Hey guys, really quickly before we get into the video, I have a last minute sort of surprise announcement that I want to make. So here is a spoiler for the end result of this video. Make sure you stick around to see how we got there. Anyways, I'm just going to jump straight in and say it. I reopened my Patreon. I know I made a video a few months ago about why I had closed it initially, but I have since done some revamping and I'm going to talk about some of the highlights because unfortunately I cannot talk about everything here. So if you want to see all of the new things that I have added, make sure you go to the Patreon at patreon.com/six.studios. No dot in between the 6 and studios though, because Patreon won't let me do that, but you can see how it's written out on screen here, and it will also be linked down in the description as well as the pinned comment. Anyway, getting into the highlights, we have 2 new tiers as well as some changes that I made to the matcha mail tier. So starting off with the 2 new tiers, we have the peach tier and the chamomile tier. So the peach tier starts at 3 USD. It sits right in between the chai tier and the strawberry tier, and it's very similar to the chai tier except that it introduces a monthly Patreon exclusive podcast. This will not be available on any other platform. It will take place at the end of the month, and it will basically be a recap of that month. So projects that I was working on, games that I've been playing, so you can expect that May will be a lot of Tears of the Kingdom, and just generally stuff that I've been enjoying that month. But I will also be taking suggestions from you guys each month for what you guys want to hear me talk about on the podcast. So if you want to leave suggestions for April, now is a great time to do so. Moving on to the chamomile tier. The chamomile tier is very interesting because not only do you receive the physical rewards of the matcha mail tier, but you also get a monthly bus commission. So my bus commissions are normally 45 USD, and I can't remember if I settled on 30 or 35 for this tier at the time of recording, but either way, that is still close to a $10 discount on my commissions, on top of getting physical rewards for the matcha mail tier, on top of getting a physical version of your print as well. So you get a digital version as well as a physical version in the form of a print or stickers, your choice each month, and there will be more information on that on the Patreon because there's a lot of options for the physical version of your commission. Anyways, moving on to the changes that I made to the matcha mail tier. So the matcha mail tier has been reduced in price significantly because I had initially unintentionally overpriced it. I did not understand how shipping worked, and so I had overpriced the tier hoping that I would still make a profit after shipping. However, I know how shipping works now, so it has been reduced from I believe 25 or 30 all the way down to 15, which is really cool. Hopefully makes it a lot more affordable for you guys, so I am very excited about that. Anyways, like I said, there are a ton of other changes that I've made on the Patreon, but I cannot talk about everything. So if you are interested, once again, it is patreon.com/six.studios. Sorry for that burst of information, but I'm very excited and I wanted to get that out to you guys. So now moving on to the video. Hey, just bumped you already. Hey, what's up you guys? It's Six. Welcome back to my channel. So we are outside because it is beautiful. Spring is finally sprunging. Kansas weather is the worst. Sometimes it's super hot, sometimes it's super cold, especially in spring and autumn, where seasons are, you know, on the cusp of other seasons anyway. So it started out really warm, and then this past 2 weeks it has been freezing cold all the time, and now it's suddenly looking very pretty. So I thought, what perfect weather for me to come outside and film a cloud tutorial. So I did a video similar to this on my Instagram reels, but you know, 1 minute is not a lot of time for me to really go in depth about you know, how I do stuff like this. So I thought a full-length video would be a lot easier for me to do, a lot easier for me to get all of that information across. Thank you, airplane. So with all that being said, I'm going to do my absolute best to give you guys a fully accurate version of my process. So starting off with the easiest thing that you can possibly do for your cloudscape is the sky. So a very simple blue sky. You know, it's all blues, but I like to kind of inch the color wheel a little bit towards yellow. So what I mean by that is I'll start with kind of like a deepish medium blue, and I will set my brush to, what brush is this? Oh, 6B. I've been cheating on my thick pencil lately with with the 6B brush, just because I've been in one of those ruts where I'm like, I hate my art, but I'm not doing anything differently. I just don't like it, so that must mean that I need to try a new brush, and so I've been using 6B lately. But the brush that you use for this portion absolutely does not matter. I just want a bigger brush than 6B can go. So I'm actually going to go in with my thin render solid, and for those of you who are curious, because I am going to use this brush a few different times, this is from Jing Sketch on Gumroad. I will list it down in the description if I remember. It is a brush that comes in part of a paid for set, but a lot of the brushes brushes in there are awesome. This is just the one that I primarily use for a lot of different things. I don't really use any of the other brushes in the set. So if you're wanting to get it for just this brush, I don't think that that's necessarily worth it because it's $15, but there's a lot of other different things in there. So if you've been looking to experiment and you don't mind paying for brushes, absolutely would recommend that pack. But I only really use this one. So anyway, start with kind of this deepish blue color, kind of a little bit more towards the purple end of the spectrum. So I'm actually gonna push it a little more towards blue because I don't really like to use purple unless it's like a sunset. So starting off, again, normal blue sky, I'm gonna start here, a little bit towards purple, but not super purple. And then I'm gonna go a little bit more this way, again, inching closer and closer towards yellow. And the reason that I do that is because the yellow is representative of like the sun, depending on where the sun is, of course, but you know, if it's high up in the sky, you know, I don't really know. I'm gonna show you guys a physical example of it in the real world since I'm outside soon, so you guys can understand a little bit more what I mean. But basically, push it towards yellow. So I'm starting here, and I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit more, and then I'm going to drag it across. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna inch that way, go up towards the lightest part, and then I'm just gonna keep doing that in little stripes, kind of getting, you know, more and more light as I go, and then do one that's a little green. That's not light enough. And it's okay if it takes a couple of different passes for you to kind of like get the, you know, the scope for, you know, how much colors you want to include. If you want to really have any green in there at all, you can, but it's not necessary. I usually end up jumping straight from, you know, this blue over to this light yellow and then white at the bottom. So then I'm going to take the Gaussian blur tool. I'm just gonna blur it all the way. And you see, that kind of looks like a sky. It's really dark at the top and then it kind of lightens up as you go towards the bottom, like you will see in real life right behind me. Okay, so we are officially near the outside. So you can see at the top, it's really dark. Well, not super dark, but it's pretty dark. Oh, you can actually see the moon a little bit. Hi. Oh my gosh. Okay. So it's really darkish up at the top, and then it slowly starts to lighten, get a little more of those blue-ish, white-ish green values at the bottom. I don't really know why, because it's like 3 p.m. at the time that I'm filming this, so the sun's pretty high up in the sky, but the sun colors are reflected in the horizon line. I don't really know how that works, but that's why I do that. Okay, so hopefully now that we have that real world example, things will make a lot more sense as far as this goes. Again, like I said, I don't really know why the light behaves the way it does. I just know from visual experience that that's what it looks like, so that is why I do that. Anyways, the next thing I want to talk about is different times of day, so things like sunrise, sunset. This same technique can be applied to those same types of day, although the colors will be a bit different. So looking at our reference image that we have here, you can see that it still starts out with this dark purplish blue and then kind of fades into this same tone. However, there's now these reds and oranges added to the bottom. So you can see here that I already filmed this once and then did a bad job talking. So I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna start with a blank canvas, and then I'm gonna start again at this bluish sort of purpley color. I'm gonna desaturate that a little bit more. And I'm going to use that same technique. I'm going to move towards the lighter, more greenish blue. I'm going to bring that down. And another thing too to keep in mind is kind of the hues and values that you're going for. So make sure that when you shift the hue, you're also shifting the value towards this lighter part, because colors may look lighter when they're different hues, but if they're not different values, then when you turn everything down to grayscale, you're not actually getting that contrast that you want. So I hope that makes sense, but again, just make sure you're actually inching things a little lighter. And then rather than going into these really green colors that we did last time, I am going to instead start from the bottom, and I'm going to use that really reddish color down here. I'm going to make that a little bit more saturated. Bring that up. And then I'm going to go into orange and then yellow, rather than doing it kind of the opposite way. So I'm starting from the top to the middle and then bottom to the middle. because that just makes color blending a lot easier when we get down to it. And make that yellow a little bit lighter. Okay, and then again, we just do this Gaussian blur, and you can go really crazy with it, or if you want to kind of see those middle colors a little bit more, you can lessen how much you want to blur it. So I'm gonna go stop maybe around here because I think that gives us a nice range of colors and values. So again, not the exact same colors, but similar enough. You would see this versus this, and you would see that's obviously a different time of day. Another thing to keep in mind is references. I really would strongly recommend looking at references when you're working on pieces like this, not even just for like scenery or skyscapes, just references in general for anything that you plan to work on, because they are not cheating. I know it's a big hot debate on whether or not artists are meant to be using references. I would strongly recommend them because our brains are only so powerful. We can only remember so many things, and just having something right in front of you and being able to look at that and apply that to your work is going to make that end result look a lot nicer than if you were to just do it from memory. So yeah, I would highly recommend using those and seeing, you know, what kind of color shifts there are, because this is not the only way that there is a sunset. If you look up sunset, you're going to see a ton of pieces that are pink, that are purple, that are all these other different colors. So I would strongly recommend, you know, thinking of the exact time of day, and then maybe finding a reference photo for what the sky looks like at that time, you know, maybe even how the weather might affect that, because that is really going to change things. But for now, we're going to stick to our midday scene, and we are going to start a brand new layer. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring our brush all the way to white, and we're going to find a brush that has a nice texture on the outside. So again, I am using that Jinx Sketch brush because it has a really nice range in both brush size and the taper as far as the pressure sensitivity and stuff goes. It gets really sharp at the end, so I am able to create pretty much any shape that I want with this brush. And it also has kind of a gentle stabilizer on it, which makes it really ideal for not getting too crazy, because I have kind of shaky hands because I be caffeinated sometimes. So I really love this brush, but there are a ton of other different brushes that you can use. For example, my thick pencil brush that I always rave about and love so much, despite the fact that I have been cheating on it lately, has a very similar texture on the outside. Airplane again. Okay, airplane aside, basically anything that gives us this kind of puffy, wispy texture around the edge is going to be ideal. But like I said, I am going to be using my Jinx Sketch brush. And the next thing that I do that I like to keep in mind is, am I doing a scene that's more semi-realism, or am I going more cartoonish? There's a sparrow running around. Hello, beautiful. So you kind of want to keep in mind just the overall shape that your clouds are going to have. So are you going to have kind of like this rounded kind of like circular shape, you know, like when you see classic cartoons where they're just like, there's a cloud? I mean, that works. And the same effect will work on pretty much any type of cloud that you want to do. I mostly just kind of let my hand do whatever, but I stay like vaguely circular and make like rounded motions for the first beginning portions of me putting together a cloud. And this is again where references can really come in handy and see and see, you know, what types of shapes that clouds can make. But there's a lot of different things. Like there's a reason that you lay down and you try to find different shapes in clouds, because they can look like whatever. So kind of just let your hand do what it wants to do. But one thing that I would really strongly keep in mind as you're filling in your shape is to leave spaces, particularly I would say towards like this middle area or anywhere where you're gonna see a shadow. Don't like fill this in yourself, just leave blank spaces, because again, we're on a different layer and we're gonna get those blended out in a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of make some little shapes. And don't think too much about it, because the more that you think about it, the less natural your clouds are going to end up looking. If you want, the airport is not on my side today. If you just want, you know, what was I saying? Basically, the more you think about it, the less natural it's going to look, the more calculated your cloud scene is going to become. So I'm just going to kind of let it do whatever. So there's that. Another thing to keep in mind is really vary the shapes and also the size of the clouds. So you know, even on a really clear day, you'll see some clouds that are super big and some that are a little small. Not if there's like 0 clouds in the sky, obviously, but on like a partly cloudy day, you're gonna see a lot of variances in sides, or on an extremely cloudy day, eventually there's going to be, you know, kind of a gap in the clouds where you'll see all of the larger clouds are spreading away and there's little tiny just puffs of clouds. So you can add those in there, you know, kind of however. Of course, the eraser exists, so pretty much do whatever. Another thing to keep in mind is making sure you're doing kind of a light hand, because that is where these little wisps will come in. You'll get those kind of like brushed edges on your clouds, so those are going to be really nice when we come in to blend later. So I am going to mess around with this a little more because it is hard to talk and draw at the same time, and then I will come and teach you guys how to blend these out. Okay, so now we have our little cloudscape going. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the smudge tool and I am going to select the thick pencil brush. I would recommend using whatever brush you used for the original paint over of it, except unless you're using a brush with a stabilizer. A brush with a stabilizer is going to make things look a lot less inorganic, or it's gonna make it look more inorganic, I should say, because it's got, you know, that stabilizer, so you don't have full control over where your brush is going. And with this particular portion of it, that's gonna make your clouds look really, really weird, because this gives you a stabilizer, gives you a nice taper and stuff like that on the edges of it. But when you go to start blending it out, a stabilizer makes it so that you're less able to kind of push the little wisps where you want them to go. I know that's really difficult to explain and doesn't make any sense, because why is it good to draw them but not good to blend them? Just trust me. Like here, okay, here, I will duplicate this layer and I will show you what it looks like when I'm blending with the Jing sketch brush. So you can see it doesn't look awful, right? It's not too bad. It's still kind of okay, but you can see that like my strokes aren't necessarily, like if I bring this up here, that's not all getting pushed around. It's just really the little edge where I am touching it. And it also kind of is all having the same kind of appearance, if that makes sense. It doesn't have any variance in texture. It's all like kind of like this fuzzy, hairy like texture. But then if I go in with my thin render solid, or not my thin render solid, thick pencil brush, I can do whatever I want. So it's a lot more wispier, or I can push things away if I want to, kind of just go ham on it. And I think that that makes things look a lot more organic, a lot prettier, a lot nicer, a lot more wispy, cloud-like, as opposed to kind of me not having as much control over that form. See, this cloud is a really weird shape right now, but kind of just go at it, go with whatever you think looks right. Again, this is another part where looking at references will kind of help you. If you think that something is looking a little weird, then definitely go look at little cloud shapes. But I think that that works enough. So I'm going to go blend all of these out. You guys can watch me if you want, I guess, but it is gonna look a little weird for a while. And there we go. So this technique is kind of going to be a little bit hit and miss because, again, you're kind of just going with the flow, or at least that's what I am doing personally when I paint clouds like this. So something to keep in mind is that you are, and I'm sure you saw me do this quite a few times, more than welcome to erase parts of a cloud, add other parts in, like with this one when I added in some more light because I didn't feel like it had enough contrast in it, or this one where I felt like the shape of it was really odd, so I split it into like 3 or 4 different clouds, or these over here I thought that there wasn't enough kind of interest, so I just dotted in some really tiny, just like itty bitty little clouds that I thought would look really, really nice. Another thing to keep in mind is make sure your clouds are all kind of generally following the same direction, if that makes sense, when you're pushing and pulling. So if you're going to do kind of like a more, you know, flat bottom for a lot of your clouds, make sure that they are pulled, you know, one specific direction. Don't have some clouds that have, you know, like wisps going this way and then wisps going that way, because that will make it appear as though the wind is moving in 2 different directions. Clouds will always follow the same path. They're in this big, you know, if there's a lot of clouds in the sky, they're all going the same way. You won't see some clouds going this way and some clouds going this way, because that's not how the world is turning, and that's not how the wind is blowing. Wind, as far as I know, can only be blown one direction at a time in one particularly given area. So if you do start seeing clouds blown in different directions, let me know, because that's strange and I want to see that. Anyway, try to keep them all pulled in the same direction. But that is pretty much it. As you can see, keeping in this blue space definitely helped you know, create some contrast, but it also makes it so that, you know, clouds are not fully solid. Of course, they are kind of sheer. They have light reflecting off of them, and so if the sky is blue, leaving these gaps of blue is helpful to put in that light reflection so that you don't have to manually draw it in later, because that is difficult. However, that being said, if you were, for example, close all these layers, doing a sunset, that is where things get a little bit more difficult. So again, we're going to look at our reference here. You can see that towards the top, clouds are actually a lot darker, so you'll start seeing colors like dark purple. So for example, I'm going to take a dark bluish purple, I'm going to go on a new layer, and I'm going to create some of those same shapes that we're seeing here. I'm not going super exact because I'm not going for photorealism or anything like that. Just basically trying to show you guys what I mean. So you're going to add in some of your shapes, and then towards the bottom they're actually going to get a little bit lighter, but they're still going to be darker on the top than their standard weight. So I'm going to actually go a little bit lighter. That looks weird. A little more desaturated. And again, just play with colors until things start looking a little bit more correct. So there. I'm going to add a few of these shapes in, and then we're going to blend these out the same way. Okay, so now that we have our clouds all blended out, this is the scary part where we will have to start adding in some of that light reflection. So once again, going to our reference, I would pick out mainly probably your favorite color, but more so the, you know, colors towards the bottom of the illustration as your light source reflections. So for me, it's looking like there's a lot of yellow and oranges, although if I were to be doing this, you know, from my own imagination, or if I wanted to exaggerate it, I would stick towards like the reds and the oranges as opposed to the yellows, even though that's technically not as correct, just because I think it would look really pretty. But since I'm encouraging you guys to look at references, I am going to go with the lighter colors. So what you can do is duplicate this layer, and you can do 2 things. You can either choose to alpha lock the layer and then apply this color kind of willy-nilly towards the bottom or bottom-ish. So for example, some clouds may have little overlaid areas where you know, that it looks like it's all one cloud shape. However, one area is peeking out, you know, more so than the other ones, so there will be light reflected in the middle, but not really areas of certain clouds. So again, just kind of go with your gut where you think certain colors are going to land. Up towards the top, it is going to be a little darker, so I'm actually going to add even maybe like a little pinkish color here towards this area, and then yeah, just kind of add those in, and yeah, just kind of go with your gut. You don't have to alpha lock your layer for this. It is totally optional. I recommend doing it if you are attached to the current look and shape of your clouds and you don't want your highlight to mess with the current look of them. However, if you aren't attached to that and you don't mind adding them in manually and then blending them away, definitely feel free to just go crazy with it. You don't have to do that by any means, but especially after the blending session is over, I really like to alpha lock it, because more often than not I'm already satisfied with how they look and I don't want to mess with them too much. And then towards the bottom is where things are going to get really light and they're almost going to look white for the highlight, like if they were just a regular cloud. So I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to have to make that really light. Yeah, and then just start adding those in towards the bottom. You're never going to see it like up here unless the sun is behind the cloud. So if it's backlit, oh my goodness. But again, if you can see the sun in your illustration, so since we're going to see it in this bottom corner over here, like right, well, it's alpha locked, so I can't do that. If the sun is right here, then you're not going to have that backlit situation going on, because the sun is obviously your light source is down here, so the light is going to be reflected off of the bottoms of it. And then yeah, that's pretty much all you have to do. You just kind of blend these out, and you can honestly leave a combination of very harsh highlights and very, you know, soft highlights, very blended ones, because in real life not every shadow is soft. There are definitely going to be some harsh shadows, so just kind of go with what you think looks right in your brain. I'm not going to go too blend crazy on this because I already taught you guys how to do it in the previous section. You just same motions, same little circular things. You just have to trust your heart and kind of go for it. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys enjoyed this little cloud tutorial. It has been so difficult for me to film tutorials recently and other types of like talking and drawing at the same time videos. Things have just been really chaotic for me lately, but I hope that this was helpful. I hope that I was as concise as absolutely possible. If you guys need any clarification on anything, if you have any questions in regards to things that I mentioned in this tutorial, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. Also keep in mind, every tutorial, not just mine, every tutorial you come across should be taken with a grain of salt, because art is subjective. You are able to do whatever you want with your artwork. You do not have to follow these as any sort of cardinal rule. You can do whatever you want. This is just what I like to do and what people have asked me how I do.